All right, let's try issue spotting a property hypothetical from a past bar exam. This is a prototypical essay. How do we know it's property? Well, because of the calls. They make it clear right off the bat. That's usually the case in our experience in a property essay. The topics could range anywhere from estates and land to adverse possession to landlord-tenant to non-possessory interest to covenants to conveyancing, even rights of water and support, although that's more unusual to find in an essay. Okay, what do we have here? And how will we be able to know what the issues are? Start with the calls. First call. What interest does each of the following have in Blackacre? We get Dan, Sam, and Carol. The second call asks us, what rights do Sam and Carol have with respect to the profits in the years from 86 to 95, and the rents from 92 to 95? Profits. That tells me this is probably about concurrent estates. It's about some sort of co-tenants. Third call, is Carol liable to Art for any of the monetary losses? So call 2 is about the profits, call 3 is about the losses. We know there's symmetry in the law. If you don't have a right to profits, then you don't have to pay for losses either. And that's the general rule among co-tenants, with some exceptions. Usually, the bar hypotheticals test exceptions. Okay, so this looks like estates and land, concurrent estates, and the rules about profits and losses. That's fairly straightforward law, and it's a fairly narrow area of law. So once you've read the calls and you've figured out what this is about, then you have in your mind a very narrow area of your property final outline, and that really helps. So look at the facts. In 1980, Fred, a widower and the owner of Blackacre, a farm, died, and by his will devised Blackacre to his 3 children, Art, Bob, and Carol, as joint tenants with common law right of survivorship. So we know we're going to need to define what a joint tenancy is and what right of survivorship means. And how do you set up a joint tenancy? What does it require? So we're going to discuss the 4 unities in a joint tenancy. But I see Art, Bob, and Carol, and the calls don't have Art, Bob, and Carol. They have Dan and Sam and Carol. So we must have a death here or a conveyance here that severs the joint tenancy. Something is coming up in our facts. We know that the right of survivorship means that if one of them dies, then his or her interest by operation of law immediately goes to the surviving co-tenants. So we write up joint tenancy by defining the 4 unities, and we talk about the implications of the right of survivorship. The hypothetical tells us that Art continued to occupy the farm. Bob and Carol never went into possession. Art lost money in his farming operations in each of the years 1980 to 85. At the end of 85, without consulting either Bob or Carol, Art conveyed by quitclaim deed all of his right, title, and interest in Blackacre to Dan and his heirs. So I see terms of art here. I see quitclaim deed, so I'm going to need to tell the grader, the reader, what a quitclaim deed is and what that means. It means that Dan received the interest Art had, no more, no less, That's all he has. Dan immediately took possession of Blackacre. So at this point, Art has severed the joint tenancy, right? And I need to tell the reader what that means. It means that Art's part of the joint tenancy is severed. And so what he has conveyed to Dan is a tenancy in common interest, a 1/3 interest in this property as a tenant in common with the other two, with Bob and Carol, who remain joint tenants together. So that's where we stand as of this paragraph. But the lost money goes to call 3, whether Carol is going to be liable to him for the loss, whether Carol will be liable to him for the losses. The rest of this, the severance of the joint tenancy, goes to call 1. What interest does each of the following have in Blackacre? Okay, so at this point, Dan has become a tenant in common. In 1990, Bob died intestate, survived by Sam, his sole heir, and by Art, Carol, and Dan. All right, Bob is a joint tenant with Carol. So at the moment of Bob's death, his interest by operation of law passes to Carol. Carol is now a 2/3 owner in Blackacre, along with Dan, who is a 1/3 owner. So now they are tenants in common together. During the period from 86 to 95, the net profits resulting from Dan's operation of the farm amounted to $80,000. During the period from 92 to 95, Dan also received net rentals of $8,000 from a tenant renting a cottage on the farm. Okay, so the general rule is that co-tenants have an equal right to possess. Because they have an equal right, they have an equal right to make profits off of that property. So the farm profits do not have to be shared with co-tenants. But what about the rental? Well, a rental to a third party is an exception to the rule. And a rental to a third party has to be shared with the co-tenants. That's the rule on profits. Okay, that goes to profits, what must be shared, what need not be shared. Remember, call 3 is above. Art lost money in his farming operations. Well, he doesn't share his profits, so he also can't collect for his losses. Finally, that last paragraph says, assume that there's a 10-year statute of limitations for the recovery of land and that no other statute of limitations applies. Wow, that wording tells you that you have an issue of adverse possession that you have to discuss here. The statute of limitations for the recovery of land, that's an adverse possession statute. And to be honest about this, if they hadn't given me that wording, I probably would have missed the adverse possession issue in this essay. So where is it? Well, let's talk about it. Who wound up living on the property openly? Think about the 4 elements that we break adverse possession down into. That your use has to be open, actual, hostile, and for the statutory period. Well, we have Dan, don't we, who was sold Art's interest. That was at the end of 1985. And now we're past 1995, and so we're more than 10 years out. We're past the statute of limitations for the recovery of land. He's been openly living on Blackacre and farming it. And so now, can he claim all of Blackacre instead of a 1/3 interest by adverse possession? That's what they wanted you to analyze. And of course, the answer to that is no, he can't. Why? Because he can't meet the element of hostile possession. He can't claim that he possessed the land exclusive of the true owners. He had a right to be there. He was a true owner, and it says that the other two never attempted to enter the land, so he did not oust them. His claim of adverse possession would fail, and so he has a 1/3 interest. So the bottom line is that Dan has a 1/3 interest, Sam has no interest, Carol has a 2/3 interest. Sam has no rights at all. Carol has no right to farming profits. She does have a right to 2/3 of the rental to the third party. And Carol is not liable to Art for any of the monetary losses. That's how the analysis would go on this one. It's a very straightforward joint tenancy hypothetical. If this has been helpful, please share the video with anyone you think would benefit from it.